of applause.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are you guys okay if we just kind of speak without the mics and yell at you guys like this? Everyone in the back, if you can, maybe one person at least. Yeah, you're good. You can hear us well. Yeah, awesome.
And if we get quiet, just put your hand up. But
I think that's going to be tougher
happen.
for you
That will
because
never happen.
you kind of like the sound of your own voice generally. Jazz Takar, Laura Stewart. We have a real estate organization. My team's telling me that we got to move a little further apart.
We've covered our own faces
there you go.
in front of our faces.
First and foremost, before we get started, how about a massive round of applause for Sarah, because we know for like the last 18 years we've been putting on events and how tough it is to get it all set up and bring people, get the food, corral people after the networking session.
You're never sure if anyone's going to show up.
Exactly. So we know how tough that is. Couple of things before we get started. I mean, who follows anyone, like myself or Laura in the room? Okay, it's a little hit on the ego, but not bad. That's not bad. We might as well get this way, out of the way. Like, who's not putting up their hand no matter what question we ask today? There's always up there. Okay, there's one. There's one. Look, we have nothing to sell you today. Okay, so your checkbooks are safe. Is that a good thing for now? For now, we have nothing to sell you. We're really here to just bring some education on this strategy, which is investing into, some would say pre-construction, some would say new builds. Not that it's for everyone. However, we thought that it would be a good idea to talk about this because I know you've had other speakers speaking about investing into multiplexes and duplexes and land development, something that our company, REC Canada, actually does help clients with. We have a team of 54 agents, and this is kind of our shameless plug, 54 agents that covers the Greater Toronto Hamilton area for the last 18 years. We also, one of the number one reasons we came here is give you resources. Really just give you the education. If it makes sense for you, great, you can get in touch with us. If your cousin Charlie is in the business and they help people invest into pre-construction, you take our information and do it with him or do it with her, we're okay with that as well. We're eating quite well, and what we're really wanting to do is just bring you the education and the resources. So one thing we're gonna get started with is if you guys, who has a phone here?
I saw them when the QR
This is the easiest question you're gonna get all day. Take out your phones and I'll tell you why, okay? Not that we only want you to follow us, but our mothers do like it when people follow us on socials. But before you actually end up following us, I actually want to give you a copy of our book, How to Buy on Your Own, How to Sell on Your Own, How to Actually Invest on Your Own, which might sound odd to some people because we are real estate brokers, so it might sound like we're on crack. Like, why are we actually teaching people to do it for free? Because we know 98% of you would never really try it on your own. So we want to be the guys and the gals that are actually putting out that information. So to download that book, all you got to do is go to recinsiders.com. recinsiders.com. Fill in your information. My team will send over a copy of our book. We practice permission-based marketing, which means at any time you get bored of my voice, Laura's voice, our emails, tired of our videos, just unsub. No hard feelings. It's okay. All right, so recinsiders.com. While you're on your phones, if you don't mind, go to Instagram. Ooh, see, we give,
they know
and then we ask.
Coming. They know what's coming.
We produce anywhere from 10 to 12 pieces of video content a day, just educating people on the process of investing, not only pre-construction, but kind of the whole gamut, the land development stuff, the multiplex stuff, all of that, okay? On Instagram, it's JazzTakar13, and it's Laura Stewart TO. I think you have like a funny hat or something in your profile.
Funny, yeah, I guess it's funny to you, maybe.
To me, yeah. Just press the follow buttons, because now you're gonna get all the content. We also have an app. It's absolutely free in the App Store, as well as the Play Store in Google. If If you just search my first name space last name, you will hear conversations with the likes of Robert Kiyosaki, Grant Cardone, and a plethora of other real investors. And when I say real investors, because it's not just the big names that we like to talk about, we also like to talk about some of the conversations we've had with a lady named Sue Murphy, which nobody in this room would probably know, but she's 62, I believe, and went from 0 to 11 properties in 2.5 years. We just document a lot of these stories, and you can find all those conversations and discussions on our app at Jazz Tac Art in the Play Store and the App Store. Cool? So again, nothing to sell you. All that stuff is free. We want to get that out of the way. We're going to go and just have a conversation for 25, 30 minutes about this strategy of investing into new builds, primarily in the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area, because that's kind of where we focus. And then we'll just kind of go a Q&A. I think we're probably best at rapid fire. Okay, do we got everyone's permission? Cool, everyone can still hear us in the back? Awesome. Why don't we get started, Laura? Let's talk about the fact that, number one, we get about 75 to 85 projects a year. So we had to get really good at doing the due diligence and finding out what are the actual projects that we want to go to our client base with. Not to impress you, but more to impress upon you where all this data is coming from. In the last decade, we've helped a little over 2,000 people with this strategy. Okay, actually buying a pre-construction, primarily condos, okay, and either renting them out or using a couple of strategies where they can flip it before it closes. We, at the highest level, our company, REC Canada, we believe in the buy and hold. Long-term, boring shit. Like, not sexy whatsoever, okay? So if you're looking for the quick, get rich quick in real estate.
There's nothing sexy about you. We understand. It's good. It's good.
I think I look actually pretty good today. I get with new kicks today too. So like if you're looking for the get rich quick stuff, not that you can't find it and it's not out there, but you're just not going to hear that from us. We buy and hold and refinance and then do it over again. Okay, we kind of follow Warren Buffett's style of investing, which is keep it very boring and make sure your lifestyle is actually sexy and exciting. So talking about the due diligence, Laura, going from the 75 to 80 projects that we get, let's touch on how we narrow that down to about 6 to 8 in a year, because that's all we really get loud about. So we get all these 75, 80 at our desk and at our office, but then we only actually talk about 6 to 8. We actually only get obnoxious, and some would say loud, about 6 to 8 of them. Talk about what that process looks like.
Yeah, I think our due diligence, generally speaking, falls under 3 categories. The first one being the utmost important one, and that's location. So you guys have heard it. I'm sure other speakers today have probably said it. Location, location, location. And when it comes to pre-construction condos, that matters just as much, if not more, in this respect in terms of, are you investing in a good project? So that narrows down quite a few. But of course, when we're looking at location, there's some things that you kind of want to look at, right? So, I mean, perhaps we're from Toronto, but I can use that as an example. We might be slightly biased, but
no, we're completely biased.
Okay.
Like, we're gonna get that out of the way.
Well, the cat's out of the bag now.
Born and raised here. Born and raised here. Like for us, Toronto is the place. It just is, because it just has the longest standing data when it comes to the amount of people that are coming into the country. When they come here, we know 50% of the time they come to Toronto. Why? Because, I mean,
that's where the jobs are.
You have all the jobs here, and most of our transit here. Even though, like, from a world-class city perspective, we're not naive. Our transit sucks compared to everyone else, like the big boys, but like the Manhattans and the Hong Kongs and all that stuff in the world. But when you're looking at location, to Laura's point, Toronto, and now we're starting to look at Hamilton as well a lot more. We're getting a lot more bullish about Hamilton for the number one reason that all 3 levels of government is putting in money. If you want to know the easiest way in terms of determining where you should invest into real estate, just look at where all 3 levels of government are putting in money. In Hamilton right now, they're putting in $4.1 billion in the next 8 to 10 years. You know something's going on there, right? Where Toronto, though, it already is established. You can bring me anything in the country in terms of where you're seeing higher appreciation rates. And Laura, Laura's the VP. I'm one of the founders at REC Canada, just to kind of, so you get an understanding. But we have access to help you right across the country, the Albertas and the Saskatchewans. We can put you in touch with certified investor realtors there. You just need to send us an email and we'll make sure we make that connection. There's no cost, there's no fee for any of that. But at the end of the day, you look at the last 100 years, there's only one real place that gets an average of doubling in appreciation every decade, and that's Toronto.
Yeah, it's really consistent, right? And so I think the closer you can kind of invest in pre-construction condos to that downtown core where all the jobs are, that's probably where you'll have the safest returns over time. But of course, that comes with a pretty hefty price point. Like, what's downtown Toronto prices these days?
Well, right now in new builds, you're looking at about $1,300 to $1,400 price per square foot.
Yeah, so it's pretty costly. So for a lot of investors, that kind of prices them out of the market. And so we say, okay, well, if you can't, if downtown Toronto is the sun, and we can't invest right where the sun is, where's the next best place? And so we say, always take a look at where there's transit. Ideally, you'd be on a subway line. Those tend to do the best in terms of appreciation. We've actually been looking at a Harvard study that happened in 2017, and it looked at global cities where there's transit, and anything within a 500 meter radius of a major transit hub, they tend to appreciate faster. They also have higher rentability. So obviously for you guys as investors, that's really, really important. And so the closer you can be to kind of that transit hub, specifically a subway, the better.
And I'm gonna cut you off because that's what I do. And she does it actually way more than I do. When you're looking at the rentability, like that word is so important, right? Because we get a lot of clients coming to us and saying, well, let's look at X location outside that GTHA because I can get a rental guarantee, it's going to be easier to rent right now because a new plant opened up. Important stuff, both of them. Rental guarantee, a new plant opened up. There's going to be jobs of 1,500. 3,000-4,000 people. But when you look at GTA, you know that the rentability, it's consistent over time because of the fact, look around this room, 80% of this room is immigrants. And that's the one side of the formula that we're looking at that cannot stop in our country. Right, so people always stop, when is this bubble gonna burst? I get what's happening with the interest rates and stuff like that. Keep in mind, just a side kind of note, the interest, like what we're seeing with the interest rates, just a little blip. They had to do this. We have to go through this right now. We've been living in a frothy environment when it comes to the market and the economy for 20 years. We know it should have been 10 to 11 years. We should have seen a dip. It didn't happen. Then all the stuff happened with COVID, we printed money, and now this is just a little blip in time, but what you're gonna see still happening, and it's actually gonna be increased in terms of the numbers, is immigration. I think it's safe to say, yes, our country has some problems, but fuck, we're one of the best countries in the world. Like, right? And I'm sorry if I throw some F-bombs, and if you do have a problem with that,
don't follow Jazz on Instagram.
Yeah, there's a few here and there. And so when you're looking at where to actually invest from a pre-con perspective into a condo, Laura's point about transit and employment is by far the number one thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, so that goes for if you're not investing in Toronto, like a Hamilton, for example.
Yeah.
Again, the closer you can be to the transit because people want easy access, most notably to their place of employment. So that's why it's super important.
And why are we looking at Hamilton right now? Why are we bullish there in terms of transit?
Yeah, well, we just sold 2 projects that were like smack dab between the GO station and the LRT.
Yeah.
That essentially you can walk there in 5 minutes, right? And that's really convenient for people. Now, some people are going to actually be traveling all the way to Toronto from Hamilton for work. But of course, other people are just, they're living working and playing all within that city. And so, but they still need to get around, right? A lot of people don't have cars anymore. If you ask most of our staff that works for us who's under the age of 30, they don't even have their driver's licenses.
Like, that's real.
They're like, oh, I'll get it next year, because they don't need it, right? They can Uber around and they can get around pretty easily now. And plus, it's expensive. Parking spots cost money too. So, it's important to be close to transit. So subway, LRT, then you'd be looking at, I guess if you're downtown, you'd be on a streetcar stop, and then the bus would be kind of the last on the list.
It's almost tiered like that. Subway, GO Transit, LRT, and then you have the streetcar and the buses. Let's jump to the builder.
Yeah, the builder is the second thing we want to make sure we look at. So the biggest fear when it comes, and the biggest risk really when it comes to pre-construction condos, is that the condo gets canceled. And I'm sure you guys, as soon as we said we're going to talk pre-con today, I'm sure some of you were like, ears closed, I don't even want to think about it. I've seen all the headlines in the news. All the developers are canceling. What an awful investment. It really only happens about 1 to 2% of the time, so it's not very frequent that builders do cancel, but they do make all the headlines. Understandably, everyone who invested or purchased as an end user is pretty pissed off because their money's been locked away for a handful of years, and it didn't have the opportunity to make any money.
And you got no return on it.
And you got no return on it, exactly. So that is the biggest reason, why projects get canceled. But the way to mitigate that risk is to purchase in a project where the builder has an incredible reputation. So there's just some builders, they'll take the loss and they'll build the project anyways, just simply because they don't want to be any part of the news headlines. And I think in the 10 years we've been doing this, there's only been 2 projects that we've gotten loud about that canceled.
And it was the same builder.
And it was the same builder, so.
And so keep in mind though that, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, you as the investor, when you're putting down the deposits, and that's something that we're going to obviously touch on because that's one of the best ways that you win with this type of investment, is that if the project got canceled 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road for whatever reason, you get your money back because it was held never with the builder. The builder never gets access to the money. It's held with one of the 5 biggest law firms in the country, and it's held in a trust account. And so you get the money back. Sometimes, not all the time, you do get a small return on the deposits that you gave.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call that a good investment.
Yeah, obviously but at least, some people think that when the project gets canceled, you lose your money. You don't lose your money because the builder never has access. What the builder's doing is using your deposits to actually get the construction financing. That's what they're doing. So when you drive down the Gardner or the DVP and you ask the question of, holy crap, who's going to be buying all these condos? That's really not the right question to be asking. The right question to be asking is, who's already bought these condos? Because for a crane to go up in the sky, 80% of that building has to be sold. Otherwise, the builder would never have got their construction financing. In fact, Toronto is second in the world, only to Singapore, with the amount of construction that's going up. So if people were worried about what was happening to values pre-pandemic, actually, let me not even say pre-pandemic, because within 2020 and 2021, values were still shooting through the roof. We've seen this decrease in values because of the interest rates. It's about to get a lot worse for people that are thinking in terms of housing affordability in the GT, in the Greater Toronto Area. Once they make one announcement that they're not increasing it, they don't even have to decrease it. They just need to make an announcement that they're not increasing. What's going to happen is real life conversations, and this is coming from 2 people that we deal with thousands of clients, guys. So we have a lot of data. What starts to happen at home is, honey, maybe we should start to think about looking at a home that didn't increase the rates. I kind of didn't like the sound of your blinking during COVID anyways, honey. We need a bigger home. This is real life. That's what really starts to happen. And so once you see that, hence why, if you're a savvy investor, and you don't need to do this with us. I'm going to reiterate all that I said earlier. It's not about trying to buy with us. I'm not dumb enough to come to these things and try to sell you on stuff. we'll get you later if we connect. You get what I'm saying? Like, if we connect, and you kind of like us, you'll do business with us. And if not, you won't. That if you're a savvy investor, right now as investors, we have less competition. We're not competing against like actual end users. Because you have two partners who are thinking about their growing a family in a home. Like, forget 10 years. They're thinking about 15, 20 years. They'll pay the extra 100 grand on the property. That's what was happening before all these rates started to decrease, right? So as a savvy investor, if you have capital right now is the time. I get the cost of borrowing has gone up, but in a lot of cases, the fact that the values have come down in certain areas in the GTA, not in all, in some, like actual black and white numbers I'm giving you. Like, these are real, not what you read in the headlines. That there's a reason the headlines are so good, so you click or you pick up the paper, right? Like, that's just clickbait stuff. When you actually look into it, not all areas values have dropped, but for the ones that have, when you take into consideration the value dropping and the rates going up, you're actually paying on a monthly basis pretty much the same amount. On $800,000 in certain areas, like, it's like a difference of $58 a month, right? But as investors right now, and before we're real estate agents and content creators and kind of somewhat trying to be comedians, I guess.
Trying.
Yeah. We're first and foremost, we're investors. Now is the time to be looking because we don't have as much competition.
You take us on some crazy tangents.
It's my style.
We're talking about builders and
right.
mitigating risk.
Okay,
Let me bring it back.
Okay, go.
Another way, just so you guys know, obviously the builder is really important, but smack dab on like the first page of your agreement of purchase and sale, it's required to be there in the province of Ontario. It will let you know whether or not that builder has permits and zoning yet. I would suggest only investing in the projects where it does have zoning or permits, or where you have a really strong indication that it has them already, because that's the big gap in terms of timelines, right? So if they don't have the zoning, that might take them 6 months. Well, in that time, in that 6 months, prices have gone up, and now the developer is like, I could sell it for more, so let me just cancel. So that's another point.
And well, one of the best ways to find out if the builder's reputation is good is to see what other projects they've completed, because that's going to give you an indication, right? Most people would know one or two names like the Tridells of the world and the Daniels of the world. You might know the names like Green Park, but there's probably, I'm going to say it's safe to say there's probably a good 15 builders they're going to build. They'll take the hit on their own reputation in terms of, not their reputation, their performas, and even make a little less money to make sure they don't take the hit on the reputation.
Yeah, probably not a good idea to be the guinea pig for someone's first development project. That's where we went wrong. We learned our lesson.
Yeah.
So now that's how we kind of get rid of 70 to 80% of the projects that come on our desk now.
So number one, location. Number two, builder. Number three is what incentives are being offered to the investor. And that's how we now get them really to like those 6 projects a year. And then here are the incentives that for us are non-negotiables. Okay? Number one being, as an investor, you need to have the right to lease during occupancy. Okay? So there's 2 stages to buying a new build condo. I say new build condo because when it's a freehold, like a detached or a townhome, you don't have this 2 closing structure, only with condos. And it's occupancy is the first date, and then about 4 to 6 months later comes registration. Registration is the time when title gets transferred from the builder to you as the investor. But the occupancy, that first date, 4 to 6 months earlier, is when the builder says to you, here, you can take the keys, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, and do as you please, except if you don't have the clause in writing, the incentive that you can rent it out, you're paying an occupancy fee. On 500 square feet, don't quote me on this, but it's right around here. 500 square feet, you're going to be paying about $1,500, $1,600 a month. As an investor, if you're not allowed to rent it out, it makes no sense. You're going to be negative $1,500 a month and you can't do anything with it. But as long as you can rent it out, then you rent it out at market rent, okay? You don't have to get a mortgage yet because title hasn't transferred. So all you're paying is that $1,500 a month. In most cases, you're renting it out. Just new reports came out, not from the headlines, from like our actual real stats. For a one-bedroom condo, 550 square feet, $2,500, $2,550 is what rents are for that one-bedroom condo. You're going to see the most cash flow that you're going to see within this investment because you're not getting a mortgage at that time. So you have to have, if you're doing this with someone else or you're doing it on your own, make sure that if you do not have the lease during occupancy incentive, walk away. Ask for it. They don't give it to you, walk away. Okay? Touch on maybe another
Yeah,
one.
the second one, and you kind of alluded to this at the start, is the right to assign. So this one's important regardless if you're an investor or not. You need to have the right to assign, and not all developers allow this, because what an assignment really is what most people probably have heard of is flipping the paper, right? So the building's not built yet, but you don't want to close or you don't have the capacity to close and you want to get out of the deal and sell it to someone else. So this gives you the right to do so. You're really just selling that paperwork to another buyer. This has actually been in the news a lot as well, assignments. There's been a lot of assignments going on, and that's because a lot of investors get into pre-construction condos with the intention of assigning it. They don't actually have the intention to close. And that's kind of why Jazz started today's talk with saying, we believe in buy and hold, because if you go into purchasing a pre-construction condo with the intention to assign or to sell it before it closes, you're at the risk of what's going on in the market. And so there's investors right now that never anticipated closing. They didn't save appropriately. They don't have the ability to get a mortgage. And they're scrambling right now to get out of these deals. And they're all using the assignment and people aren't buying them.
In fact, if you're only doing it to flip it, we would probably advise you not to do it.
Yeah.
Just move on to a different type of investment. How many strategies are there in investing in real estate?
But the reason you really do want it is we kind of consider it more of a safety net. In the odd event that, you know, you did all the right things, but life happens, because sometimes it takes 4, 5, 6 years for these things to get built. Things happen. You might change your mind. You might get relocated for work in another country or whatever it is. And you don't have the ability. Financial hardship, you don't have the ability to close. And so this gives you that ability to essentially sell it to another investor. So that's a very, very important one.
Cap development charges. Okay, so because you're buying, this is another incentive that we need to make sure that is in place. You're buying something today. Generally speaking, it's probably 3 to 4 years, kind of when the building's going to get built and you're going to occupy it and rent it out and all that, okay? But we don't know what the development charges that the city is going to be charging to the builder that also get passed on to the investor slash purchaser. So what we want to do from today's date is cap those charges. So if they're more, the builder's out of pocket. If they're less, we as the investors are going to pay the lesser amount. So we've got to make sure that we understand that those development charges are capped. We leave the most important incentive till the end, because this is where you get to kind of make money when you invest into this type of strategy. And that's called first access pricing. Okay? What happens is if you can imagine a 300 unit building, okay? What the builder's going to do is that they're actually going to force the appreciation, because they're going to release these units in batches. Generally speaking, it's 30 to 40 units at a time. What we've seen from the first access of pricing to probably the 4th or 5th allocation of units, which is probably a difference of about 8 to 12 months, is anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000. So if you as an investor walk into a sales center, you're probably too late. The second
like
is
on your own.
On your own, I apologize.
Without
yes, good point. Yes.
An agent.
So it's very, like, don't get caught up in the hype of like when you're walking downtown or you're walking in a major city, you see the big A-frame signs that says open to public, come in. If you were to purchase that condo at that time, you probably paid anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 more than somebody who did it in first access pricing. Okay? One of the main reasons people like this strategy, there's a couple of them that we're going to cover. But by far, the number one is that you don't have to come up with the full 20% down right away. So remember, you're buying something today, it's going to close in 3 to 4 years from now. Your 20% as investors here in Ontario, it's staggered. It's staggered over that 3-year period. And so on average, there's slightly better ones than the average that we're going to discuss, and sometimes they're a little worse. But this is kind of how it would look. It would go 5% to 10% in a year time. So 5% in 30 days of the purchase price. Let's pick a $700,000 unit. 5% in 30 days, $35,000. 5% in exactly a year from that date, another $35,000. 5% in 2 years from today's date. And then the final 5% would be due at occupancy 3 years down the road. Now, one of the main reasons that investors like the staggered approach is because then you could go do other types of investments. You're a little bit more liquid. If the values even increase by 5% because of just market appreciation / passive appreciation, and or what the builder's forcing it by increasing the pricing in those allocations by 5%, well, your return on your money has been 100% now. I see some head nods and some like, this guy's an idiot. What is he talking about?
They zoned out a long time ago.
Because of you.
Oh.
Because of you. Does that make sense? You give the 5% to $35,000, they increase the price by 5%. Your return now was 100% on that money. So again, you might be sitting there thinking, I don't like this type of investment for whatever for a couple of reasons, which we're also going to talk about. Side note, I've been doing this for a very long time. Anybody who tells you that the investment, all of it's rosy, run the fuck away from them because they're full of shit. There's no way everything about a single investment is perfect. There's always a risk. Always a risk. And if they're not telling you the risk, then you need to move away from them, okay? Like, this is just out of a lot of experience, guys. Millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars transacted, not to impress you again, more to impress upon you that you met an Indian guy and a blonde one day, and this is what they told you. I was trying to get these two guys all morning.
Yeah, the whole time,
these
focused
two,
right
the whole
there,
time,
laser focus.
The whole time. I was trying to get
You got
them.
him, you got him.
And it was the Indian and the blonde one. That's why. I just wasn't
You
sure.
needed the right joke.
I needed the right one. It just took me some time.
Can you guys believe I work with this guy every day?
Okay. You get to work with this guy
yeah.
every day. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
I'm really serious about that. That's so
win?
serious because we see and hear all the horror stories. That's why I'm so adamant about that if you only got this one thing from our talk, that's good. 4 questions that you ask anybody, forget pre-construction, any investment, okay, is what is the investment, i.e. pre-construction, multiplex, land development? How much is the minimum investment required? When do I get my money back? I give you $1 money whoever I'm speaking to, when do I get my money back? Okay? And the 4th question, what are the risks? And that's why I said, if they tell you there's no risks, you need to run away.
Because I'm the brains and you're the beauty of this relationship.
Yeah.
I do remember where we were.
Business relationship.
Yeah. So on top of obviously you putting your deposits down over the course of time, a lot of people also like this because the bank doesn't really know that you've made this purchase unless you tell them, right? So you're able to continue to do your other investments in this time. There's a project in Toronto that it's not going to be built for 7-8 years. So you have the ability to do other investments without the bank saying, hey, what's this? I don't know. It's too risky. So it gives you time to kind of make other purchases and do other things while you're obviously knowing in the background that you're going to get your ducks in a row, hopefully in time to obviously make this purchase.
And you said that unless you even tell the bank, even if you tell the bank, they don't care. It's just because they're not taking that into account when you're doing the other investments. Meaning it doesn't show up on the radar. right? Like there's a formality that is needed the day that you do the agreement of purchase and sale, that you have to come up with a mortgage pre-approval, but it's worth less than toilet paper. And the reason is because you're buying something today for something that's closing in 3 years. Like, what's gonna stop you from buying some Lambos and Ferraris in that time period? You know what I'm saying? And like your pre-approval means garbage. But the builder needs it, a letter that says, yes, Sarah's good to move forward with this investment as of today, because then they take those stack of letters and show them to their financier, and then they can start their construction financing, right? And so like even to the earlier point of canceled projects or delays, I think that's a bigger thing. There's usually delays in construction.
There's always delays.
Sorry?
There's
all
always
100%. And so people will say like, oh my God, like these builders. I'm not a builder, so I'm not speaking on their, like I'm not speaking from that experience, but they want out that project quicker than you want the keys, because their money's tied up in this project as well. So make sure that you understand that.
Yeah, and I think it's important just to go over maybe some of the closing costs. So what you guys are going to be paying on closing. Obviously, during the build-out period, you're paying your deposits. But on closing, what you can expect, so that's the registration date, obviously, when you're going to get title. You're going to have your legal fees, obviously. So that's the same as any other investment project. You're going to have your cap development charges that Jazz went over. And then on top
big
of,
one.
and your land transfer tax, of course. But there's one caveat with pre-construction condos, and that's HST. So as an investor, you're actually required to pay HST on your pre-construction condo purchase on closing, and it doesn't work out to be 13%. It's usually a flat fee of $24,000 that you'll pay on closing. The good news is, though, is back on occupancy, because you had the right to lease during occupancy, you know, it's all coming together now. When you had the right to lease during occupancy, you would have got a tenant in at that time. And so you're gonna pay the HST on closing, but the very next day, you're gonna apply for a rebate. And in that application, you're gonna show that you have a 1-year lease agreement in place from 6 to 8 months prior. And then the CRA is gonna say, okay, you are actually providing housing, and you're not just kind of parking your money, and that's great. So we're gonna give you the majority of the $24,000 back. I say majority, it works out to be just a little over $23,000 usually, and I say that because it's the CRA. So they opened your mail and they charged you for that. They charged
100%.
you $1,000 to do it.
Risks involved. So with this type of investment, there is no risks involved. All right, so you guys were listening. All right, good.
That's a good one. I like that one.
That was a new one.
That was new. The other ones are old. I hear those all the time.
Yeah. So number one is obviously that they don't build the project, right? You get your money back, as we mentioned. The other thing is that in 10 days, and this is not really a risk, it's just, it's something that you need to consider. It's a con, call it whatever you want to call it, right? In Ontario, when you purchase a pre-construction condo, it's not a new build. A lot of people think that if they buy a brand new home, they automatically get this 10-day cooling period, it's called, legally. Okay, in Ontario, it's only when there's a condo involved that you actually get, because when there's a condo, then there's a condo corporation, and then there's a statement of there's a declaration, and like they have to discuss and show you the reserve fund and what they're planning to do. A status certificate is the actual word. And so that's why the government of Ontario gives you this 10-day cooling period. It's different in other provinces. But once you pass that 10 days, and it's not like when you buy a resale. When you buy a resale property, you actually have to do what's called a waiver. You have to sign a waiver. You have to sign a notice of fulfillment of conditions saying that you're good to move forward. In Ontario, and this is serious, it happens all the time. Like if you buy something and you fall asleep for 10 days, you just bought yourself a condo. Like you don't have to sign anything. You automatically went firm. So be very careful in that time period. That's the time that you need to dot your I's and cross your T's. Take it to a lawyer, take it to your friends, to your barber, or whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? But that's the time that you need to do that in. Okay? When you get into day 11, this is what you need to consider. Your money's tied up. You can't get it out. The only time that you're going to be able to get it out before this gets built is through an assignment, but that assignment generally can't happen T-minus like a year from the closing date, because the builder has stipulations on when you can assign, i.e. the building has to be 90% sold, it needs to be constructed to the 80% of
the structure
of the building.
Like, it's different for every building, but essentially the developer doesn't want to be in competition with themselves for sales, right? So they still have inventory that they're trying to sell. And it's important to note, because a lot of people think, oh, this is great, I'm going to buy it at first access pricing, and then 3 months from now or 6 months from now, when the prices have been jacked up, I can assign it and get my money out and the profit. It doesn't work like that. You have to hold on to it. It's usually like you said, whatever the occupancy date is, usually a year out from that, you can probably look at assigning at that time.
So we're going to kind of go into Q&A, but before we do that, we'll give you a couple. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. A couple of things in closing with this type of strategy. I've done majority of my portfolio consists of pre-construction, and again, it's not the only way to invest into real estate. It's a strategy. For me, I'll tell you why. It's boring. Like it's like watching paint dry. This type of investment. There's no excitement to it whatsoever, right? But for me, I'm also that guy that, like, for all the content that I shoot and the businesses that I have, I'm too busy. Like I can't put up a piece of art on the wall. I'm not handy like that. So I need a type of investment that's completely passive and boring. It's one tenant. You close on it, and for 5-7 years, all the appliances and all those things have warranty on it. You know what goes out on these things? The friggin' burner on the stove, a light fixture. So it's easy for me to just call a handyman or a handy woman to go get that fixed. This is not an active investment by any means, right? It's a very, very passive investment. You probably shouldn't be. In fact, we at our organization do not let any of our clients to have, is it 2 or 3 we do now?
3.
3. So we will not allow any of our clients to have 3 ongoing pre-construction investments at the same time, because you should be diversifying and you don't want to be heavily weighed into just pre-construction condos. But most, in my opinion, again, call us biased, because we made a lot of money with this strategy. The 2,000 clients on average, hands down, on average, from the day they bought it to the day that it closed, on average, they've seen an increase in their portfolio anywhere from about $125,000 to $175,000. What's the play there? And you can look at, I don't know if any of you subscribe to Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine, but myself and my business partner in the real estate company, I mean, they had us write an article on actually our strategy when it comes to this, investing into pre-construction. And all we do is that we close on it. We used to be able to do it within 6 months, just go back to the bank, refinance it, pull out the equity.
Yeah, it's important to note, you're closing on it not at the new appraised value. You're closing on it with the purchase price that you paid 4 or 5 years prior, right? So if you get a short-term mortgage, see, I get to cut you off too.
Yeah.
If you get a short-term mortgage, then you can refinance, obviously, and pull out all that equity pretty quickly.
And so now it's probably a year. Like in the last couple of years, we wait a year, we pull out the equity, and now we own a condo in the GTHA with 0 of our own money. And before the questions come about the cash flow and stuff like that, I'll preface it by saying, like, if I'm a couple $100 negative, and this is generally doesn't sit well with people, but I'll say, if I'm a couple $100 negative on a property, for me, I don't really care, because I know what it costs to take Laura, my 2 videographers upstairs with nachos right now, and I didn't even drink
hopefully
yet.
a beer.
And a beer, you know what I mean? So like, I know what we're making money. This is an equity play, right? You can get to, like, other than like right now at this time frame where the rates have increased, you're generally going to have neutral cash flow. You're not getting rich off of this from a cash flow perspective. Where you're actually creating wealth in the long term is because it's an equity play and it's very easy to get into. In fact, if you have someone in your in your life that's in their 20s, you want to know the best way to get into investing into real estate, or even just get into real estate within the GTA, is a pre-construction, because you make sure that that 20-year-old, and no offense to anybody in this room, but nobody looks like they're in their 20s right here, right now, including myself. Just, full
30s or
transparency.
40s.
I say this because we probably all have someone that's 20 in our life, that if you make them pay 5% down a year over year, it will stop them from buying dumb shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, the car's not gonna be first on their mind. Clothes and the silliness that 20-year-olds now, and I'm not here to tell people where to spend their money. I'm not that guy. But if you know somebody who's in their 20s, this is a great way. It's a great forced savings plan, because you have to put down your 5% year over year over year over year. I'm gonna close with that, but
yeah, and I guess my last thing
you couldn't
to say,
let me close.
I couldn't. I
You
can't.
couldn't have let
I
me
can't.
close. I
got
tested
it.
you.
This is like
I was actually
a power struggle.
I know it is. It always is with you.
I think it's just important to note that when it comes to pre-con, like the quality of the tenant is also usually pretty high, because again, we're kind of purchasing in downtown locations. You're getting young professional people. I rented for years when I first moved into Toronto because I couldn't afford to buy a home, but I always had the intention. I always paid my rent on time, and it was not like I wanted to be a professional tenant. I do find that in some other strategies, the tenant profile can get a little bit dicey. Usually you're dealing with people who pay on time. They only stay for 1, 2, 3 years max, and then they leave, and there's always kind of that ongoing tenant to come and pick it up. So that's usually a good thing, is that you're not really dealing with a lot of headache kind of tenants.
And I won't be an ass to go. No, I won't be an ass. I'm telling you, I won't. I won't
can
close.
end it.
I'll
You
let
can
you
end it.
close it. Just talk about November 2018, because that's important when it comes to tenants on a new build.
Oh yeah. So any type of condo that you had, that if you owned a condo before November 2018, you could only increase the rents by whatever the posted amount was every single year. And that obviously was hurting some people over time, because they couldn't increase the rents to whatever the market rent was. No longer. So if you purchase a pre-construction condo today, that does not apply. So if after a year your tenant's still there and the rents went up, or after 3 years the rents went up, you can automatically change the rents to whatever the market rent is
On that tenant.
And obviously that's going to be, it's not always about, as investors, getting the maximum amount from your tenants. If you have a good tenant, you might want to consider doing what you can to make that relationship really good. We always say, like, treat your tenants like they're your clients, they're your customers, and this is really a business. And so don't just always be looking for that extra $25 or $50 every month. Sometimes, like, having a really good, solid tenant is worth it. So that's how I'm going to close. So we'll open it up for questions.
Questions? Yes. Sorry, your name?
My name's
Carm?
Yes. You said that if you walk into a sales office, you're paying maybe $100,000 more.
Possibly.
But if you can't get the pre-construction, like let's say you guys had these projects and they completely sold out, and I really wanted one of those units, then what's the best way to get it?
Look, I mean, you want to get in touch with people, and I'm just trying to say this in a way that doesn't make it look like you got to get in touch with only us. You want to make sure that you get in touch with people that are doing this a couple of hundred times a year. So we do this literally 200 times, anywhere from 185 to 200. So on average 200. Laura kind of overwatches that all for us at our company, where we just have first access 95% of the time on all the projects in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. So the best thing to do is to just make sure you enter recinsiders.com, filled in your info. You're going to get the copy of our book, but now we got you. You got your email address. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So you've been part of our world before?
Yes, I saw you on a podcast and I was blown away by your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ex-business partner passing away.
Yes.
Laura, you've just been so transparent in your social media, and so I actually.
It works.
She talked about me first, though.
I came here mostly because you guys are going to be here. But
Thank
I
you.
was blown away also by the other speakers. So
Shout out to Sarah, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Thank you.
important to know, like, if you did want to get into a project where they are saying that where they're sold out, the builder's never fully sold out.
That's a good point.
Usually they keep at least 10% of the units to sell closer to that occupancy date because now people can see the building, they can see it and smell it. And so there's always that opportunity to kind of get in at the end. But I would really ask you, if you're an investor, why are you so married to that project? Like, I think at the end of the day, it does come down to the numbers. And so try not to get too emotional about like, oh, this is going to be the it project. A lot of times the marketing, they do it on purpose, right? To get everyone excited about it. But once the building's built, no one really refers to it as, oh, that was the Pharrell building. Like, we had a building that sold in Toronto that Pharrell was
Probably
marketing,
a rapper
right?
guy. Yeah.
And like, no, once someone resells their unit, no one's gonna know what that building was. And so that's to entice
And they
us
had
all
a
as
huge
investors
premium
to get in.
to it. So there was
Yeah.
2 buildings right next door to
Yeah.
That's a great one. I haven't thought about that one for a while, Laura. 2019,
2019.
Yonge and Eglinton on Broadway, if anybody knows that area, okay? Pharrell's building, massive marketing campaign, okay? Next door was 65 Broadway.
That was what they named it. Like,
They just
the
named it
address.
65 Broadway, okay? A difference of $100 a square foot.
It's selling at the exact same time.
Same time, maybe the Pharrell one was a little nicer lobby, right? But to Laura's point, when these both get built in the next year, like I think they're both coming to the market.
Yeah, soon.
Excuse me, next year, no one's gonna remember the Pharrell stuff.
And the
Like, nobody
tenants are
cares,
price
you know?
conscious, right? So the tenant cares less about
Yeah.
being, with the most impeccable view. They don't care as much about the finishes. They think to themselves, I'm going to be here for a year. I'm trying to save for a down payment for my own home. I want to buy real estate. So they are more price conscious than anything. So I wouldn't get kind of too caught up in that hype.
And when you're looking at layouts, for example, that's the other point too, right? Tenants, when the building actually gets built, they don't have access to all the layouts that you're gonna have access to when you get started. And the reason I bring that up is because people are always like, oh, I really want this layout over this layout. There's some stuff that you wanna look at when you're looking at the layout. And the number one thing is this practical from the tenant's perspective? I've always, and my clients have generally always won with like boxed units.
Yeah, like cookie cutter.
Cookie cutter, boxed units, a nice
boring.
little square.
See, he buys the most boring.
100%. Because can I put a square unit? I know I can put a bed, 2 night tables, and a dresser in the bedroom. Where can I get my couch? Slight little section. What's that thing called? Chaise? What is that thing called?
Chaise.
Chaise or whatever it is. Yeah, like, that type of sectional with a TV. And I know I'm going to rent this out like clockwork. One comes in, another one comes, they might stay because they're great, but if they leave, great. I'll bring in someone else. It's going to be like clockwork.
Next question.
Yeah.
In terms of investment, like with respect to rentability, do you find 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, what size of unit do you find works best?
If you look at the last 45 years, and I say 45 years because that's kind of when the first set of condos came in downtown Toronto. The gentleman who actually brought them, if you Google him, his name is Hunter Milbourne / the Dean of Condos. I say that to just drop a name because it makes me sound cool because he's a good friend of ours. But it's important, right? Because that's how we got the data. But if you look at the difference between a 2 bedroom and a 1 bedroom, a 2 bedroom will always appreciate more than a 1 bedroom. With that said, your actual return on your investment is probably a difference of 4 to 5% year over year. Meaning, if you take your total return on your investment, including the passive appreciation, the mortgage pay down, and the cash flow, you're generally getting a return of 28 to 30% year over year, counting everything. The 1 bedroom would be about 4 to 5% less. Now, what I always tell people is that if this is your first time going in, the price point is going to be maybe $200,000 difference between the two. Now, you as an investor have to ask yourself, the $200,000, the 20% down over the $200,000 is going to be $40,000. That $40,000 over 4 years, $10,000 a year, if that's going to break the bank, and I'm not here to, like, I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way, then I would go sway towards a 1-bedroom because your return's going to still be really good.
Like I have a 1-bedroom and I have a 2-bedroom.
Yeah,
right.
and
Like
I actually
they're both good.
I actually started 18 years ago in the business. I started investing into pre-cons and stuff like that about 12 years ago. I started with studios. Why? Because I knew that when I brought a tenant in, there's no way he or she's going to be in here for long. Out you go. Let me increase the rent when somebody else comes. Right? But it also got my foot in the door as an investor. Values went up. Like, call it 10 years ago, just for easy math, we were doing condos in downtown Toronto. Downtown Toronto. For $400 a price per square foot. And then they went to 5, and then they went to 6 and 7, and it kept. And every single time I called my clients and said, "This is another one that we should look at," they're like, "Jazz, it can't go up any higher. Like, you're on drugs, bro. We can't do this anymore." I'm like, "Okay, I'm just letting you know that I think it's going to keep going. And when is it going to stop? When either the blue government, the red government, or whatever this new reddish orange one is, like when." And I don't go on political rants, guys. I'm just like, I'm not that guy, but like whatever it is out there. You know what I mean? When they stop allowing immigrants to come here. But will say this again, that if you look at our Canadian economy, it cannot run, which it's a business. This is a business. The economy, the government is a business. It cannot run without immigrants. They have to keep bringing people in because we pay taxes. And so this is not going to stop values going up, especially in the GTA because of the Greenbelt legislation. We're landlocked here. On the north side of us, we're restricted land. On the southern part, we haven't figured out what Dubai has and built on water yet. We haven't got that down yet. And so because of that is why we go this way.
She asked about 1 and 2-bedroom condos.
I gave the answer.
Like, where are we?
I'm here to
right
bring
now?
value. I'm here to bring more.
Take another
than you
question.
asked. We have a question in the back. Yes.
Your company's model, you help with the selection and sale of the project. Do you take it beyond by like helping your clients manage the properties?
Yeah. So again, the team of 54 agents, we have about, 5 or 6 agents on our team that are strictly focused on helping our investor clients lease out their units. So as soon as you kind of get that email from the developer saying, this is when your occupancy date is, that's when you can bring it to us and say, okay, let's get all our ducks in a row for occupancy time and let's rent this thing out.
Fully turnkey.
Yeah.
Fully turnkey. We also have, this is for everyone here, it's a full real estate concierge service. There's no cost for it. Okay, and what does that mean? If you need a plumber in Timbuktu, Saskatchewan for one of your properties, we vetted someone out, and if we haven't vetted them out yet, my staff will vet them out for you.
Regardless if you purchased it with us.
It doesn't even matter. Yeah, if you've never purchased it with us. If you need an electrician in Vancouver, we'll get them for you. Why are we doing this? Because people always ask. Let me peel back the curtains. It's a lot easier if we find ways to bring you value than when your cousin says, I need to sell my condo, I need to sell my home, I need to buy another home, I want you to think of REC Canada. But you're only going to do that if I offer you stuff up front for free. So like I'm pulling back the curtains. Like there's no bullshit the way that we roll. It's that. We're not perfect, but what we try to do is bring as much value to our insiders and into our community. And the one way that we do that is offer fully turnkey services from when you buy to when you rent out. Yes?
Just a clarification. Do you have flexibility in terms of managing 1 bedroom in a 2-bedroom property?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Supposing I bought a 2-bedroom property
Yeah.
through you, and then I only want to have 1 bedroom rented out
Yep.
because I'm planning to use the other one.
Yep.
Do you have flexibility?
Yeah, well, you do, right? But I'm not sure if that would be a good investment necessarily, right? But
You want to use the other one for your own purpose, and
for sure you can do that. Yeah. Yeah. Just got to find a tenant that's going to be okay with it. Yeah. There's a question behind you, I believe. Yes? No? No question? Okay. No, I'll go to this side.
yeah, just I'm a mortgage broker, and
Yeah. Yeah.
from the builder.
Yeah.
Um,
We're seeing that.
yeah, and seeing it a lot more often now. How are you guys helping guide the client in terms of
So we're
Yeah,
taking them.
and maybe just
Go,
give
Lauren, you go.
context. A lot of people, we usually refer to it as mortgage pre-approval letter. So that's required by every single builder. It wasn't the case just a couple years ago.
it was easy to give the approval?
Yeah. So we weren't really seeing them, but now developers, their lender is saying, look, I get that you sold 80% of the building and you want your construction financing, but how do I know like these people can even close? Like, are these people who don't have jobs and they're just banking on the assignment? You know, we don't want the whole building to be assigning these things, right? So you do have to do, this was the formality that Jazz was talking about, like not really worth the paper it's printed on. I think you'd mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
And some developers will require that you go to a tier 1 bank. So those ones are a little bit more difficult to get. And so if you don't feel you can get that letter, which you can do within the 10-day period, you can go to the bank and get the letter. If you feel that or if the bank says no, then you have the opportunity to get out of that deal still, as long as you did it in the 10 days. A lot of developers, though, it's a letter from a mortgage broker, and so there's a little bit less
Well, that's the thing.
diligence.
Did that, and this is like they've had the pre-construction for at least 2 years now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now the developer, the builder, is asking, no, we need an actual commitment from a lender.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
we gave the letter and they didn't accept it.
They didn't
Yeah.
accept
And
it.
so, like,
You're gonna have to do a full application.
Yeah.
Sorry, and
Yeah.
when you say we, I take it's for one of your clients.
Yeah, my client,
Got it.
like, I
So
had this
you're gonna have to do a full application,
Yeah.
and treat it like it's closing today. And
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Shop around.
But it's not like, when I say it's unfortunate, I mean that from your perspective as the mortgage broker, because you got to do all that work and you're not getting paid right now. So I completely understand it. I completely get it, right? From the investor's perspective, it's not that unfortunate. At the end of the day, you're going to take a little hit on your credit. And like when somebody checks credit, unless it's like all happening at within a 30-day time frame and you're getting multiple hits, then it brings your score down. But you taking them to one of the top tier lenders and going through the whole process,
Well, that's
it's
fine with
it's
that.
more work.
It's when they get declined.
Yes.
And then the project doesn't close until another year.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. Couple of things I would do there is number one is go back to the builder and explain the situation. You'll be surprised how many of them will work with you, right? They actually have like templated emails that they just send out. Like when they're sending it out and replying back, some of it's just like templated. You just got to get on the phone and call them and tell them the situation. Number two, if the client really can't get financing, and this is for everyone in the room, another reason we love this strategy is because you get to buy time and decide how you're going to close on it, i.e. bringing in a joint venture partner, right? And so in your situation and your client's situation, they might need to bring in another partner to actually get the financing. And there's probably hundreds of people, and probably in this room, there's probably a lot of people that would say, look, give me 25% of the equity on the deal, I'll go on title. Right? Like if there's equity of 100K on it, and I don't have to put money, like me as Jazz Tacker, I don't have to put money into the deal, and you just want my capability of getting financing, I'm going to strongly consider going on title for 25% of that equity. That makes sense? Cool? Maybe one more if Sarah allows it. One more. All right. Was that valuable today? Yeah? Awesome. Thank you for having us, guys.
Thank you.